Okay, in this tutorial we're going to work on our back end on our stories page, and what we're going to do is we're going to create our delete page and functionality. So here I am on my delete page. So the first thing that we need to do, is we need to create a delete story page. So I'm going to use my backend template. I'm going to just duplicate that. And I'm going to change that to delete story. And I'm going to turn that yellow just so I know I'm working on it. I'm going to open that up quickly and just take a look at what's going on. The first thing I'm going to do, I'll leave the title that way. And it looks like everything is good to go. So, okay, my delete story is set up, so I'm going to go ahead and just minimize that page momentarily. And what I need to do is open my stories page, because as you can see, when I click delete story right now, it's a dead link. So that means in the href attribute, it's just blank. The value is blank. So we need to go in there and change that. So I'm going to open my stories page. Okay, so the page looks good, and I just want to remind you, we ran this query so we could populate this table row, and we selected all from stories. So what we're looking for is right here in this TD. Inside this anchor attribute, we have the delete word delete, so it creates a hyperlink. What we need to do is create a link that links to that page. So I'm going to type in delete story. I'm just obviously the file name .php. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to open up my browser. I'll refresh that browser, and so now when I click on these links, it takes me to the delete page. Actually, every link now takes me to the delete page. But what we need to do is we need to pass a value to this delete page, because when we get to the delete page, it has no idea that we're trying to delete that particular story. So we need to modify our code. Now, all we really need to do is take a look at the story ID. So conceptually what we're doing is we're going to pass the story ID from the stories page to the delete page. To do that, we're going to modify this href link. And the only thing we have to do is rewrite a question mark, because we're getting ready to create a value that will be passed. And then we're going to create a little value. Now, I'm just going to write story ID. Now, this thing that I've typed right here, I get to make up that value. I'm only putting story ID right now, so everyone is clear on what's going on. So story ID is like a value, it's a variable name that is being passed through the URL. You'll see that in a moment. So I'm going to say story ID equals, and I'm going to copy this PHP echo, and you should by this point understand what's going on now. So what will happen is every link that's created, every delete button is going to have its own link with a unique story ID for the story. So let's go ahead and save this and take a look what that looks like in the browser. So once I refresh that, and now when I click this delete, you see this is story ID 5. If I click the delete button, now take a look up in the URL bar there. You see now it says delete story ID 5. That's good. That means it's actually passing story ID 5 to the delete page. If I hit back and hit for this story ID 4, you see it's 4. So I've created a situation now for each link is passing each story's ID value to the delete page. So that's pretty much it for the stories page right now. So let's go ahead and get to the delete page, and let's work on our delete page. So I'm going to close the stories page. And in the delete page, what I want to do is I'm going to start writing some copy. Now the first thing I want to do, you see I've already got my valid user conditional that shows my backend content, and if not, it shows me the login button. So what we want to do is that we want to create another little conditional. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. We want to create another little conditional in here. Well, the first thing we want to do before we create a conditional is we want to capture the URL. Sorry, we want to grab that story ID number out of the URL. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open and close PHP real quick. And I'm going to type in the variable. We're going to create a variable for story ID. And we're going to make that equal to, now you saw we used the post global variable. So now we're going to use the get variable. This is what you use to grab values out of the URL that have been passed. So we're going to do $_get bracket. And this is the structure for the variable. Whoops. But what we need to reference is this variable name. So inside there, and again, I made that up, so I have to make sure it's consistent here. So now this functionality, this grabs it out of the URL and then bundles it in the story ID variable. So if I echo this variable and refresh the page, we see 5. So if I click on stories, delete story 4, 4, and so on. So now we've actually captured that story ID in the page, so we can start using that variable to do things. In this case, we're going to write some copy that says you're about to delete something. So I'm going to go ahead and create a paragraph here that says you are about to delete the story. And I'm going to put blank X's right now from the website. It will be deleted forever. And then we're going to do hit the delete button if you Okay, so I've got my little blurb there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little form here. So I create myself a button. So again, action, and remember it's going to load the same page, so it's deleteStory.php, and the method will be post. I'm going to close the form element. Inside that form element, we're going to have an input button. And the type will be submit. And then we'll have the name it. We're going to name it delete story. Remember, that's the value we'll check for here in a bit when we write our conditional. And the value will be delete. That's what it's going to say in the button. And I'm going to give it a class just in case I ever decide to style it. And I could give it an ID as well. I might as well do that just so. No, I'm not going to. But we also need to have another value, and I haven't demonstrated this to you all yet, is that we're going to create another input button. And the type is going to be hidden. And so this form field will not show up on the page, but it can actually trap values. And the value I want to trap in there is the story ID. So I'm going to give that the name story ID. And that's really, since it doesn't appear, I don't need to style it, but I do need to give the value attribute. And let me close that. So let's take a look at something because I want to show you what we're working toward. So if I refresh the page, you'll see our copy you're about to delete. It will be deleted forever if you're certain you want to delete it. Now there's our delete button. Now if I go into the source code and I look at my code here, you'll see there's my hidden button. And of course all my PHP's gone, but I need that value to be populated with the story ID, in this case 5. So all I have to do is I need to echo that story ID that got created. So I'm going to turn that off because we don't need that anymore. So I'm going to open PHP, echo, and we're going to echo the story ID. Now if I go back and look at my browser, I can actually refresh the source code itself. And you see now it has the number 5 there. So if I go back in the browser, well, you get the idea. If I brought story ID 4 here, that number would be 4. Because we're going to post that value and we need that story ID after it gets posted to delete the story. So what I want to do here, I'm going to create this nice little query, just a really correct select query that can populate this headline. So just in case someone, doesn't really notice what they're getting ready to delete, it can kind of give them a reminder. So inside here, after that story ID, I'm going to run a connection. Yes, and what I want to do is I'm going to jump back into my other code and I'm going to grab my query information. So I'm going to scroll down. Now I will warn you, I do this myself, and it's it's a fast habit because you're reusing your code, but it can be a little bad habit because if you don't rewrite it over and over again, you never really learn it. So just let that be a little warning. I'm going to copy this code all the way down to the row fetch ASOC. Close that page now. I'm going to get back up in here. I'm going to paste that in, and then I need to modify it. So select all from stories, order by story published. I don't need that. I need to select all from stories where story ID equals story ID equals, that's right, story ID, the one that had been posted. And then I don't need this while statement, so I'm just going to have that fetch ASOC with the row. And now I can get in here into the X's, open PHP, echo, row. And you remember this, we did this in our stories table, the syntax, so I'm not really going to explain it. Story ID, nope, let's do story headline. And close PHP. So let's take a look and see if that page is working. Get rid of the source code. If I refresh it, there it is. Now I'm going to add a little strong element here, just to make that headline stand out a bit more. So now let's go ahead and refresh that page. And there's, you're about to delete the story. This is another headline from the website. It will be deleted forever. Okay, so that's good. Now what we need to do is we need to actually, so we've captured the story ID that comes to the page, and then we've populated the content of that page with it, and now what we need to do is we need to process that form and delete it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this into a conditional. So I'm going to go ahead and underneath this backend, let's do delete story. Let's go ahead and modify that headline. You don't have to have that. So let's go ahead and create a conditional here. Now I'm just going to modify my code a bit. Actually, I'm going to terminate this tutorial here and pick it up after pick up the rest in a second tutorial.